Today's guest is referred to as the Fear Guy. He's an alchemist and a coach. He's a life enthusiast and intuitive coach. Sorry, he's a life enthusiast and intuitive coach. Welcome to the show, Ben. How are you doing?
Nobi, thank you for having me. I appreciate you. That's interesting. I haven't heard the life enthusiast thing in a minute, but that is true. I do. I'm all about loving life and and trying to get the best out of it because it's yeah. To me, I don't see any other option. So thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And like I told you before we started recording, you're definitely a light and just and not necessarily just what you do. Like I know this podcast is successful, but just in the way you show up and just like knowing you for 5 minutes, I can already tell that you light so many people up. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me. I'm truly excited to have you here, and I'm looking forward to learning about fear and all the possibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, yes. As in, I've been looking forward to this episode actually for quite a while now.
Awesome.
So thanks for joining me on this episode. And
So welcome.
yes, I would love us to start by you are known as a fear guy, and I would love to know about your fear, your own journey of fear, and how you came about to become the fear guy. Can you share this with me?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, it is a good question, right? Because who calls themselves the fear guy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of how I view it is one, I don't take it super seriously. My mom doesn't call me the fear guy. She still calls me Ben, you know. But it's like, but also it's like an alter ego sometimes, you know, when it's uh when you know like a superhero, sometimes like Superman, Clark Kent type of thing is
Yeah.
it's that's how I view it is, but at the same time it really is me. Like that's who I am as a human. It's a hat that I wear, it's an identity that I choose to use at times. And how my own journey with fear is really interesting. And so it's not that I don't feel fear, because every human feels fear, but my relationship with fear is different. So I believe and I know that I chose to come to Earth for a purpose, and that purpose was specifically for this. That doesn't mean it's not going to stay this. It's not going to change. Like it's going to change. It won't be the same forever. Like I'm always being prepared for the next thing. But as a kid, I was definitely different. And my upbringing it definitely even prepared me for this role. And so what I mean by that is, yes, I still have fear and I still do to this day. Like it's always a continual like unlayering and remembering and removing and releasing and leveling up and all those fun things. But for me, the first big moment that I had with fear was actually on my 19th birthday or close to it. My friend actually gave me this book. So this book is called The 50th Law. Have you ever heard of the 48 Laws of Power?
No, not really. I've never heard of
So it's a book by Robert Greene. So Robert Greene's a pretty big author, but the 48 Laws of Power has mixed reviews because it's all about power and manipulation and control. But what it does, it takes you through history and it shows you how power has been used and manipulated, and it shows you why and how to do it. But the beneficial part of that, right, is to know how it's being used, so you can be aware, so it's not used against you. But with this book, he did a sequel with the rapper 50 Cent. And so that's why it's called The 50th Law.
Yeah.
And so the author, Robert, he just basically studied and talked with 50 Cent, and he wrote this much easier to read, because the other book is like, it's big and pretty difficult, but this one is much easier to read, much more palatable, especially for a 19-year-old. And at this time, I was actually beginning my journey in music. So I was in a hip hop group back in the day. And so this was my first passion. Like I started my journey, music was my thing. Like undoubtedly in my mind, I knew that I was going to do it for the rest of my life. And so when my friend gave me this book, what the premise of the book is to basically have a fearless mindset. And in the book, I got inspired just from that point on in my life was to do everything that I was afraid of. So at that point, what I was afraid of, right, was asking girls out on dates. I was afraid of me and my friend, because we were beginning our music careers, we were afraid of performing. So what we did is we actually went downtown into the city, and we would go to random strangers on the street and ask if we could freestyle rap for them. And we would ask them for a topic. But we were terrified. Like, we weren't good either. But that was the point of it, is like, we want to put ourselves basically in the lion's den and feel that fire and like wanting to grow. And so at 19, we actually started this thing that we called fear fighting. Mm-hmm. And that was the big major shift for me, where I was like, and then I saw the benefit from that of like, I'm getting better at performing. I'm getting better at rapping. I'm building chemistry with my friend, and it just gets easier. Like, it feels good. It built my confidence. And I started from that point. I went to, doing just like having difficult conversations. Like, as soon as I felt fear, I knew that was the thing I needed to do. So that was just my guide. And then, fast forward through some university, through corporate life, through relationships, all the fun things, losing money, making money, I came back around to fear. And it was at the very beginning of the pandemic, ironically enough, is where I found that fear guide calling, because I had a different business model and I had left my 9-to-5 job at this point. That's another fear story too. But it was crazy. Like, I believe that life is happening for me. And like, I lost all this money and I left my job, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do? Like, I was at a point, Toby, where I really did not know what I was going to do. Like, I had debt. I had no money. The pandemic had just happened. And I was like, I'm at my mom's. I'm like, what in the world do I do? But all of those circumstances were perfect. Like, because they were the perfect mixture to put me in a place of surrender. So my calling, my purpose, which is working with fear, and to guide others and to inspire others to work with their own fear, to use it as a compass, to use it as a teacher, happened perfectly in that moment. And so I said yes. I rebranded my business. And from there, so many cool things have happened. But it seemed like a big moment of just switching into the fear guy. But so many life moments had prepared me for that. And then all of a sudden I just had to say yes. Things changed dramatically. And then I continued to say yes to fear every single day, because it's a journey, my man. It's a journey.
Yes, I can imagine. And I find that very, very inspiring and very informative, actually. And one thing that is also going to be very good for you to share is going to be that fear of, living your 9 to 5, that security that you had, living it even at the peak of the pandemic, for example, and, saying yes to the fear of, of that, and saying yes to the possibility of what comes after leaving your job. Can you share the story? How did you overcome that fear, or how did you go about it?
Absolutely. So for me, fortunately, I had economically, so for money, so I quit my job almost 2 years ago. So it was the beginning of 2019. I made this big investment into cryptocurrency. So I invested 40,000 US dollars, which is a lot for most people. It's like, and I leveraged debt. So I was like, you know what? Like, I just felt good about it. Like, like, your financial advisor wouldn't like me, because I am the person who I make decisions based on my gut and my intuition. And of course, like, my eyes were big of like how much money I could potentially make with it. But for some reason, I just knew that it was the thing I should do. And so I invested this money. And at the exact same time, I accepted a new job. So I was recruited for a director, 6-figure, amazing opportunity at this company. And so I said yes to this new job. I took the new job. So, I was going to have stock options. I had savings. I had a 401k. I was single, no family, no dog, no mortgage. So it's like, for me, it it was the perfect time to make a big risk. Like in my mind, I was like, I'm ready to make a big investment. Like I've kind of been doing the small things,
Yeah.
and now I'm ready to go big, like take a big risk.
Mm.
And so that happened. And then I was actually making money doing nothing. And so I started to take some out. I started to reinvest some. And then eventually, like 6 or 7 months later, I was like, why? Like, this is potentially making more money than my 9 to 5 job. And before this other corporate job, I had spent, I think, 7 or 8 years at the same company. And then at this new job, I was only there 7 months, which is funny. But I knew that the job wasn't for me because I didn't want to be my boss. And so like, he is a great guy. Like the CEO is a great human, the VP, great human, but I did not want to be them. Like my soul and heart wasn't in it. Like I'm not a lazy person, but it was almost like I had to force myself to be there. It was like I was showing up late. I was like leaving early, taking long lunches.
Yeah.
And it was like I was almost like repelled from it. And it was such an interesting experience. So that's how I knew, right? As like, okay, something's different. This isn't for me. And then fortunately, I was having that passive income. And so someone told me one time is if money didn't matter, what would you do? And I was like, oh, I'd quit easily. Like there's no question, right?
Yeah.
But to the realistic person, it was like, well, you got to have savings. You got to have 6 months. You got to have a backup plan. And I'm not like that, but I still felt the fear of it was still just scary. Like there's so much unknown. It's just wild. Like, but similar with that investment, like just that big risk, I knew I should do it. I knew that I should leave my job. And it was scary. Like it was terrifying, but I knew I just needed to jump. And so I quit my job. And the thing that I noticed, how I knew I made the right decision, is that if I remember like, not having a job for like a first time, right?
Yeah.
And it immediately felt like me, meaning it didn't feel like some people when they quit their jobs, they like shove stuff. Like they have a big quit store. They throw the things off the desk.
Yes.
They throw things in the air and they're like, woohoo, like F the man, screw you,
Yeah.
And for me, it wasn't like that. It was like a confirmation. It was like, oh, this feels like me. And so that's how I knew. It was like a calm confirmation of, oh, this is me. Like, this feels like me. And now it's almost 2 years later. And sometimes like, it's wild how it's worked out. Like I've had lots of times, I've had lots of doubt still, right? Of like, how's this going to work? It's like, but it always does. And it's crazy. So that's how I quit my job. But then when I quit my job, that's when I found out that money I invested, I lost the initial investment. So I still had some savings from that, but the initial investment I lost. So that's when I was like, shoot, like I really got to figure how to make money and not just kind of chill and have fun and travel. Yeah. And then that brought us to the point we already talked about at the pandemic of making the money was one of the best things that happened to me because it allowed me to quit my job. And then losing the money was one of the best things that happened to me because it allowed me to find what I was supposed to do with my life.
Yes. And now you are living like in a better version of yourself. You are living the best version of your life then.
Yeah, I would just say, you could say best. I would just say me.
Me, are you?
Because I think everyone has their own story. Everyone has their own path. I do not believe in telling people to do things like me. I believe in doing what your heart tells you. Like you have a unique design and purpose and path.
Yeah.
So what does that look like for you? And only you know that. So you can take inspiration from my story, but it's just doing what is aligned and feels good to your best version or to your highest, self and soul. So it's, I'm continually, coming back to what feels good for me and what is right for me, not just because this is the right thing to do because you see it on social media or whatever, you see friends do it, right? 'Cause that stuff doesn't go away. that stuff is still there of like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to sell like this. I'm supposed to market like this. I'm supposed to do courses like this. But it's like, okay, I can still take inspiration from those things, but what is natural and organic to me?
Yes, I like the fact that you made mention of that. Like it boils down to you knowing yourself and
Yep.
knowing what you're supposed to do, your purpose, and how you have to go about it. Not following Ben's story and saying going to do exactly what Ben did or
No.
whosoever is out there. Yeah, yeah.
It's doing you. Like you said, like knowing yourself. Honestly, that's arguably, I think, one of the most important things you can do
Mm,
is just know yourself.
yes.
But and how you begin to know yourself is make mistakes, and like and find out what you don't like or find out what isn't you.
Mm,
Um and yeah, like it's fascinating. But yeah, long story short is yeah, do what is natural and aligned with yourself.
yes. So what would you say is your definition for fear? Or what's the truth about fear
Oh,
from your experience so far?
oh, I like that. That's a good question. So I think like the what's like a definition? So I think one of the definitions of fear of like if you look in the dictionary is like highly unpleasant emotion,
Mm,
um, either real or imaginary. And so
mm.
it's like right, and that's exactly
Yes.
what it is. It is very unpleasant, and to me, I believe that fear is at the root of your suffering. So, but fear is also the key to your freedom, right? Your transformation is on the other side of fear. So I view fear as a compass, as a guide, because what you most fear is usually what you need to do the most. There's a quote by Joseph Campbell of the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek.
Mm,
And that's what fear is, right? Is it's keeping us controlled and small um, in our not best selves, but that's also what we need to do to become our aligned, organic, best, highest self.
yeah.
So fear, man, dude, it's powerful. Like I believe it is the most controlling. It is the most people don't realize how much it rules their life in every aspect. Because if you just start paying attention of where am I fearful, you make a lot of decisions out of fear every single day,
Yes.
right? Even if, why am I not saying the thing fully, right? Why am I not expressing my truth? Why am I not doing this thing? Why am I not posting this? Why am I not investing this? Why am I not taking this action? Um, like there's so like anything that you feel dis-ease or uneasy about or you feel resistance to,
Mm.
the root of that is always fear.
That's very true. That's very true. Like I can, as in, I can really relate to that. Like, posting on social media, for example, we always have the fear of how will it be accepted? How will it be seen? Or
Yeah.
maybe investing in a business, like, will I lose this money? And what's going to happen to my investment, for example? It's always like big fears that want us to, combat or deal with every day. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be, yeah, like you said, small ones, and there's definitely big ones, right? Like going into a relationship or leaving a relationship or going into a job or leaving a job or new city or new town, like, or leaving, like it's interesting how all those things, but like you said fear of being seen.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot of people don't, yeah, I mean, it's so fascinating. Like, yeah, there are so many different fears, but really what they come down to is like the fear of not being good enough and the fear of being unlovable.
Mm, but how do you deal with that? Like, let's just jump into that already. How do you deal with the fear of not being seen or not being lovable, loved, or accepted
Yeah,
as you would want to be?
that's beautiful. I mean, Toby, so for you, why did you not want to be seen?
Why did I want to be seen?
Yeah,
I just feel mostly because maybe I'm shy or something like that, and I don't want too much attention or necessary attention or something.
perfect. Because you don't want to attract attention because why?
Uh, I don't know. It makes me feel, it makes my skin crawl and makes me feel uncomfortable and
I love that. Yeah, thank you. And right, I can tell, and it makes other people feel that way too, right? Of attracting attention means something to you. So
Mm,
that's why I'm asking those questions, right? Of I'm afraid to be seen there's different stories, right? So it could be that you believe being seen is wrong. So, right, of I don't want to attract attention because that means I'm not humble. So
Mm,
that's something that I have dealt with, right? Is I don't want to make people think that I'm better than them.
mm, mm.
Does that ring true to you at all?
Yes, like the last part. I don't want people to think that I think I'm better than them or something. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that's common for people like you and me who were so nice. You know, it's like, and we're so loving.
Yeah.
But the ironic thing, right, is fear is protecting you from the exact thing that you want to do, right?
Yes.
Because fear is protecting you from, okay, I don't want to be seen because I don't want people to think I'm better than them.
Mm,
But you still love these people. You still want them to be inspired, right? And
yeah.
so what happens by you not not owning your power or not stepping into the full vision of you to be seen?
It's that fear. Yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah, by you not doing that, you don't inspire those people,
True. You're right.
right?
Yeah.
So so the fear of being seen. I actually have a podcast about that. Did you see that yet?
No, I've not listened to it yet.
Perfect. That will like it's it's like a private coaching session. So I
Mm.
take you through like exactly what to do so that could help for you and other people.
Yes, yes.
Um, yeah, but it's so often it's related to like a fear.
Mm.
Um, like if you want to relate it to like a fear of rejection.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid of being rejected. So I'm going to reject myself so other people can't.
Mm.
So you do the exact thing you're trying not to do.
To do. Yes.
And you don't get any type of result now, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting mix of getting to the root of, well, why am I afraid of being seen? It's like, well, because I don't want people to think that they're less than me. I don't want them to think that to think that I'm better than them.
Mm.
Well, is that true that by me putting myself out there that I'm better than them? No, not at all. Like it's not true. If anything, it's look, I feel this fear and I'm stepping into it. So that makes me brave. I'm exercising my courage, and then you can do the same thing, and then that will inspire people with like within their own life to step up and also be seen, right?
Yes.
So that's what I mean of because you want to inspire people,
Mm.
but if you are not seen, you will not inspire people.
True.
So that is the choice, right? Of, okay, if I listen to fear, I'm not going to do the thing that I want to do.
Yes, yes. You're right. So how can I learn to, love fear or embrace, all of this fear? How can I do that?
Oh, I love it. So just simply, I think the very first step, just like a baby step,
Mm.
is knowing that fear isn't wrong.
Mm.
So similar to anger, right? We don't want to feel anger because that thinks it makes us an angry person,
Yes.
right? Or I don't want to feel sadness because that makes me a sad person,
Mm.
which that isn't true either. So if I feel fear, that doesn't make me a fearful person, or that doesn't make me wrong. It makes you a normal functioning human. Like every single person, you are designed to feel fear, right? So at a biological level, your brain is always looking for what's wrong. So when people suffer from anxiety, stress, or worry, that's exactly what's happening because your brain is always, because we live our lives 95% subconsciously. So your brain is, without you even knowing it, always looking for what's wrong because that's its function, is to protect you from harm. So if you have something good, it's the immediate thought is how I'm going to lose it, because your brain isn't built to be like, okay, well, let's look for good things. It's no, like this part of your brain back in the early days was, I need to look for threats so I don't die,
Mm.
right? It's a survival tool.
Yes.
But now most of us don't have to deal with, tigers and lions every day, but that part of our brain is still very active. So what it does now is it continues to look for threats, but the threats come in people not liking a photo on social media. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Mm.
so it's still real. It doesn't make you wrong, but an understanding that it's a normal emotion that you're going to feel, that's step one, and to allow yourself to feel it, and feel safe feeling it. But a lot of people aren't safe. It's this weird relationship where if you grew up in a chaotic or stressful environment,
Yeah.
fear is going to feel very normal to you.
Mm.
What that means is that has now become your baseline, that has now become your default. So as soon as things start to go well for you, like you experience love, you experience success, you experience peace, that actually feels foreign to you. So your brain registers that as a threat because that isn't your normal. So anything out of your default setting is considered a threat to your brain, even if it's something very, very good, because that is different.
Yeah.
And so different means bad. And so it's trying to protect you from that. But so you just have to practice feeling that, right? Of, oh, even good things, this is why I self-sabotage. This is why things don't last for me. This is why I'm always stressed, is because this feels normal to me. So a very just first step is normalizing it's okay to feel it. If you practice meditation or you practice breath work, even just a few deep breaths with yourself when you feel fear, close your eyes, get centered, tell yourself it's okay to feel it. And then the next step would be, what is this revealing?
Yeah.
Right? One of my favorite questions to ask is, what if fear didn't exist? Because that always leads you to your truth, right? Similar to what I said about the job, like when I left my 9 to 5 job, what if fear didn't exist? Well, I know what I would do. That's my truth,
Mm.
right?
Yes.
If I'm in a relationship, what would I say? What would I do if fear didn't exist? That's my truth. And it's not a matter of like, well, I would go, like say all these mean things and cheat and like on all these women. It's like, that's not your truth. That's still like a shadow. You're still trying to hide. You're still trying to numb something. But most people listening, I imagine, when you ask the question, what if fear didn't exist? There's somewhere deep down that they know what that is, and it's love. Because fear is not the opposite of love. Fear is the absence of love.
Yes.
And fear and love are very tied in. So I use an example of like a thermometer. So when you have a thermometer, right, at the top is hot, at the bottom is cold. Let's say love is at the top, hot, and cold is at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So they're opposites, yes?
Yes.
They're opposites. However, is there at any point in the thermometer where it's not a degree, right? So even if it's freezing at 0 Celsius,
Mm-hmm.
it's, what if it's 1 degree Celsius? Would you still say it's cold? I would still say it's cold.
Yeah.
What about 2? It's cold. So it's like,
Mm.
but so what I'm using is, well, what is hot? What is cold? Same thing with fear and love. Well, what is fear? What is love? It's very clear to see, okay, 100 degrees is really hot and 0 degrees is really cold.
Yes.
However, is they are still degrees. So why I say that is because there's a book called The Kabbalion, and it has this quote of, or close to this quote of, opposites are different in degree, or hold on, opposites are identical in nature but different in degree.
Hmm.
So hot and cold are still heat,
Yes.
right? So even like if you go into space, for example, it's really cold, but the part that the sun shines on, like on a satellite, it's actually really hot. And then the opposite side where there's no sun is really cold.
Mm.
So it's the same, it's bringing that metaphor back around of, okay, now I know fear is the absence of love and cold is the absence of heat.
Mm.
So it's fear and love come from the same intelligence. They come from the same source.
Yeah.
It doesn't make one better or wrong or right. But when you know that fear is the same intelligence. It's the same energy that love is made out of,
Mm.
because they're both, like, to stick with the metaphor, it's still a molecule, right? So if you have ice, you still have water molecules. Like, they're closer together
Yeah.
and they're not moving. Well, they are moving still. And that's, we could talk about that too, because energy is everything. But, right, those molecules are still moving, but they're close together and frozen, versus once they get really hot and gaseous, they're free and moving all over the place.
True. Mm-hmm.
Right? And the same thing with fear and love. But it's still a water molecule. It's still two hydrogen and one oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it's in the gaseous state or if it's in the frozen state, it's still a water molecule.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean is opposites are different and are identical in nature but different in degree.
Mm.
So it's once you realize that as like, oh, fear and love are actually really the same thing, just a different expression, just a different degree, you can have a lot more compassion for yourself, and then you can begin to make new decisions.
So would you say love casts out fear, for example?
So simply, yes. I think it's more nuanced than that.
Mm.
But yes, I think you have the choice to choose, love or fear in every moment.
Mm.
And that goes back to the question of, well, what if fear didn't exist? Well, I would feel love.
Yes.
However, fear reveals where you don't feel loved.
Mm.
So that doesn't make fear bad, right? If I want to feel more love, if I want to be more free, if I want to be more successful and fulfilled and feel more me than I ever have, then going to the fear is where I should look.
You're right. Right. So my next question is actually inspired by one episode of yours from your podcast. I've not mentioned it. It's called Feeling Free with Ben Harris. It's available on all major platforms. I was listening to it, but it has to do with, a little bit of meditation. So I said, okay, I'm going to listen to it later when, I when I have a lot of time to, listen to each second of the episode. Yes. So it talks about, speaking to fear. So that's the question. Are there ways we could, speak to different kinds of fear that we experience, and how can we overcome this fear, or how can we even use this fear to our own advantage?
That's cool. So you said you have listened to it, or you're listening to it later?
I was listening to it, then it came to a part where you have to, do some work, like some meditating.
Okay.
So I paused it and said, okay, later I'm going to do this.
Okay, cool. So yeah, it's a similar question of what I asked of, like, what if fear didn't exist? Or you can even just ask fear, what are you trying to show me? Or why don't I feel loved? Or why don't I feel enough? Or a fun question I like to ask is, what would I believe? Or, like, what do I want to believe? Because you can choose what you want to believe at every second, any moment of the day. So it's when you speak to fear, I believe fear reveals where you're not free. Fear reveals like I said earlier, where you don't feel loved. And so using that as a guide, as a compass, speaking to it, because I believe that fear is an energy and fear has a consciousness. So when you speak to it and you listen to it, it's doing the best that it's doing all it knows how to do. And so when you can speak to fear, I also have an episode with Shaman Durek. That's a really helpful for people if they want to dive into, like, the energy and the frequency and the spirituality of fear. But that's really what speaking to fear is just listening. Because most people don't want to listen to it because it freaks them out too much. They just avoid it and they hide it, and they get far away as possible from it. So speaking to it is just simply just listening. Like, what is this trying to show me?
Okay, so once you recognize this kind of fear in your life, you're going to maybe take some time to sit down with it and speak to it and try to find out what it's trying to teach you or show you.
Yeah, exactly. It's that simple.
Yes. And are there like some meditation one could do to that, or some breath work or whatever, to really dig deep into that into that fear or that realm of really being able to concentrate on the fear or speak to the fear?
So if they want to go deeper,
Yeah.
so I like it. So yeah, like, if you want to go deeper, I would begin journaling and keeping track of every negative thought that you have, of every time you feel fear, of every time you doubt yourself, every time you don't feel enough, anytime you want to hide,
Mm.
I would start to track all those things. Just do it for 3 days or 7 days, and you will begin to notice a trend of, oh, this is where I feel fear.
Mm.
And then you can go into those things and do those things that we just talked about of, well, why do I feel fear here?
Yes.
And then you can just ask the question like, okay, if I feel a lot of fear around my job,
Mm.
right? If I'm worried about doing a good job because I don't want to be fired,
Mm.
well, have I ever been fired? No. Then, okay, why am I worried? Have I ever been fired? If the answer is yes, well, am I doing better than I ever have before? Am I getting, it's just getting to the truth of it. And do you know who Tim Ferriss is?
No, no, is that?
So Tim Ferriss, he has a good, he wrote the 4 Hour Work Week,
Ah, okay.
but he has this exercise. It's a TED Talk, and it's called fear setting. So if people want another deep dive into fear, it's instead of setting goals, he believes in setting your fear basically.
Mm.
So you identify what your fear is, and then you look at it. Okay, well, what can I prevent this from happening? And then if it does happen, how can I repair it? So it's just a really simple reframe of fear as well.
Yeah, yeah. Ah, okay. I should go check that. I think, wait, he has a podcast, right? I think I've seen that name somewhere before.
Yes, he does. He has a very, very successful, popular podcast.
Yeah, I've seen it on Apple Podcast before, but I never took note of the name also. Yeah,
Hmm.
it rings a bell. Yes. So, yeah, how do you now, with all of this stuff discussed already, is there a way that one could, gain like total freedom from fear?
So I think it's a yes and no.
Hmm.
I think yes because that's what I want to believe, and so it's um, because I think that we have all experienced that, right? I think even if it's just for a moment, I think we can think back to a time where we really did not experience fear. It was just pure bliss and love and excitement and the freedom.
Hmm.
So that feeling does exist because we felt it. And the fact that we're even talking about it makes it possible. Like the fact that we're just asking the question means like it's possible because we wouldn't be able to even know that the question was possible if it was impossible.
True.
And so I think it is true, but I like the first thing that I tell clients is fear doesn't disappear because part of our human brain,
Hmm.
like we talked about earlier, is always looking for things to protect us from and to predict our future.
Yeah.
And so I think like ascending in consciousness, or maybe when we die, right, we're not going to feel it exactly.
Yeah.
But we can practice not feeling it as heavy and not feeling it as controlling and overwhelming as it is,
Hmm.
and just see it for what it's trying to do of like, okay, you're just trying to protect me. No, I'm not going to lose my job. No, I'm not going to lose my house. No, I'm not, this doesn't mean I'm unlovable. No, this doesn't mean I'm like better than someone else. No, that doesn't mean like all these things that it's telling you it's trying to protect you from because
Hmm.
it's individual, right? Like everyone has a story or has trauma or has experiences of that reason. And there's this quote I like. His name's Peter Crone. He says, "Past hurt informs future fear."
Hmm.
And
Past.
that's exactly what happens, right? Is okay, I got hurt at this point,
Yeah.
so the now me is trying to protect me from experiencing that hurt again.
Hmm.
But that's not happening right now. So it's actually kind of crazy that I'm living my life based on right now
Hmm.
for something that is no longer even real. That it's no longer happen. It's not happening. So why am I afraid of it? So it's just going into that of like that's so interesting of like I'm afraid of something that technically doesn't exist, but it feels very real.
Hmm. And that's what fear does to one. Yes. It makes you.
Yep.
Yeah.
It paralyzes you.
Yeah, that's true. But still, it has some crucial importance, right? Like trying to protect you or other importance that it has for us.
Yeah, like yeah, it's good. I mean, thankfully for fear, like I'm not gonna go jump off a cliff or touch a hot stove.
Mm.
So it still like does basic biological human protection.
Yeah.
But there's a deeper layer to fear, like the energy and the spiritual side of it, where it's very unhelpful.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Earlier when you were sharing your story, you talked about you quitting your job to start your business, for example,
Hmm.
and taking investing into cryptocurrency, for example, and all that. So in this world, I know I've noticed in the little time I've spent on Earth right now, I've noticed that things are very fast and dynamic. So how can we let go of that fear of not catching up or not meeting up with our with the high demands of this world, and how can we embrace new beginnings? For example, how can we even look forward or be excited about
Mm,
trying out new things, going to new places, and experiencing new things?
I like that. So asking, like, I'll ask you, like, when you feel like, why are you nervous about letting old things go? Or like, why are you nervous about leaving now, right? And why do you fear new exciting things?
Mm. Um, I fear that because I would say now it's certain. I know what is happening right now. I feel comfortable with what is happening right now. I am certain. I have the security of what is happening right now, and then trying out new things for me will be like, yeah, throwing me into the deep blues, for example, into the deep water. I don't know what is waiting ahead of me, and yeah, it's not just sure. So that security is missing.
Yeah, right. Like you're exactly right. Is like you don't have that security.
Mm,
But I really like this question, so thank you for asking because it's, and I think this will help you and other people, right? Is so I'm trying to think of the best way to ask this. So the security of the unknown isn't there, right? Like, or of the unknown is like I don't know what's going to happen.
exactly.
However, Toby, like, has the quote unquote current, your whatever you're living as, right, or everyone else listening, the current thing that you think is stable, that you think is secure, has
Mm,
that feature happened yet?
no,
No.
no.
So the ironic thing, right, is you're still afraid of something that hasn't happened
Yeah,
for
true.
both.
Exactly.
So the ironic thing is when people tell us to be realistic, is they're actually being delusional too, and they are being unrealistic.
Mm,
Because if someone says, okay, Ben, Toby, like you need to be realistic, stay in your job, this is never going to work. Don't leave. It's too risky. It's, you don't know what's going to happen. Something bad could happen. Who knows?
yeah.
You could lose all your money and look like a failure.
Mm,
Like, okay, yes, that is a possibility.
mhm,
However, the thing that you're telling me to be realistic about has not happened, and the future that I think sounds really cool has also not happened.
mm,
So when someone tells me to be realistic, I laugh because they are also being unrealistic.
true.
So, like, does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Right? Like, we're both delusional. We both believe in something that hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So it's ironic, right? Is we both parties are exercising faith
Yeah.
because someone says be realistic and plan for the worst.
Mm,
That worst case scenario hasn't happened.
mm,
So they are choosing to put their faith in something that hasn't happened.
mhm,
And you can also put your faith into something that hasn't happened.
mhm.
But which future do you want to focus on creating?
That's true. But sometimes people think the current situation is very familiar.
Yep.
Is you know about it, and from this point of view, you could project into the future to determine what could happen. But then if you
Hmm.
switch lane or if you embrace something new, you don't know what you are getting yourself into, and you don't know how to project into the future that way. And this fear of the uncertainty is always like, yeah, very, very, very huge.
Yeah, it's very big, right? But the same thing is like, yeah, you could project into the future, but it still hasn't happened.
True.
You can project all you want. Stock market crashes happen,
Mm,
Bitcoin prices happen, people die, wars happen. Like, unfortunately, car crashes happen, shootings happen. Like all these things that are unfortunate
mhm,
is, yeah, they're less likely to happen because we can look at the data and say, okay, well, this is maybe least like less likely to happen.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is yes or no, has it happened? No, it hasn't happened yet. Okay, well, what future? It may not be quote unquote less likely,
Yeah.
but there's a part of your brain called the reticular activating system. So your brain looks for what is familiar. And so if I choose to believe that this is a possible future, then my brain automatically starts to look for it. Like, have you ever bought a new car before?
No, not personally.
Do you own a car at all?
No, I don't own a car.
Do you have a dream car?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
What is it?
Oh, it's going to be. I actually have a lot of dream cars actually, but it's going to be a Mercedes EQ, like one of these electric new Benz vehicles.
Cool. So you probably see a lot of I mean, I know you're in Germany,
Yeah.
but you probably, so you'd see more than me, but you see a lot of, I imagine you see a lot of those cars or similar cars on the street driving, right?
Yes.
Do they catch your attention and do you look at it?
Of course. Yes.
Perfect. So because that is your dream, the part of your brain is now looking for that familiar thing because you've chosen to believe that this is what I'm going to have one day.
Mm.
So it's just a pattern recognition system. You could get as spiritual or woo as you want, or you can just stick to the psychological point of it. Your brain is looking for to recognize those patterns to confirm that you are correct. So because your brain doesn't want to be wrong, the ego does not like that. The ego doesn't like being wrong, and that's part of the familiarity, right? Of the ego protecting you and staying in the familiar place. So you could flip like the worst case scenario of like, this is more familiar. I'm using this real life example because you were seeing Mercedes and other people. As soon as you decide, oh, this is the new car I'm going to get, you start seeing those everywhere.
Mm.
But those cars have always been there.
True. Yeah.
So it's just turning on the part of your brain of, I am now going to recognize this. And that's part of your subconscious, right? Because now you believe you've turned on a switch of Mercedes are important to me. So it's your subconscious is always scanning, oh, that's important. So now I see it.
Mm.
But if you decided to find Toyotas, you'd probably start to see those too.
Yes, yes.
You know?
It happens to me with Teslas also when I see Teslas on the street.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like, but how many Toyotas have you not seen because they're not important to you?
Oh, so many.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. True. Okay. Oh, that's good. So can we've talked a lot about fear and there's one question that is important to me because I'm a guy and that is with the men's vulnerability and emotions. Can we connect this with fear also? And how do we express our emotions without having the fear of it being taken the wrong way? How can we be vulnerable and let go of the fear of being vulnerable?
Man, you ask good questions. I appreciate you so much. And this is something that I'm still, always discovering and leaning into. Because so for me, I grew up with a lot of women around me, a lot of feminine energy. So I've been soft, quote unquote. I've been sweet. I've been sensitive. And I thought for someone like me, I thought I was pretty good with emotions. And I've realized, wow, I'm actually not that good at them. So I don't think it doesn't matter who you are. A lot of men, it doesn't matter if you're the tough masculine guy or if you think you are in touch with your emotions, there's a lot of fear with it. And so so if you're like the typical man who has a fear of emotions because you don't want to look weak, that's one. Or speaking from personal experience, what I mentioned earlier is like, I don't want to feel sadness because that means I'm a sad person or that means I'm doing something wrong. That means I'm not being positive enough. So that's what my identity was built on, is being super positive. So if I'm not positive, then I get the feeling that I'm not doing enough.
Oh, yes.
So it could be a mix of things, right? But in either case scenario, it's okay, well, one, you're not your emotions. So feeling an emotion does not, if I'm angry for 10 minutes out of a day, does that make me an angry person? That's less than 1% of my day. You know what I mean?
True, yes.
So it's like, no, that doesn't make me an angry person.
Mm.
And for the person who is afraid to feel emotions, like they think that they're weak or whatnot, this is the ironic thing about fear, and you'll see there's a lot of irony with fear, is I've seen this with men sometimes, right? Of, I don't want to feel emotions because, it's feminine or it's womanly or it's weak or I'm not strong enough. So many different things.
Mm.
But the ironic thing is, choosing to not feel emotions is because why?
Because you fear, you fear what other people will think about you, actually.
Yeah, you are making an emotional decision,
Ah, yes. True, 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 true.
right? So isn't that
Yeah.
ironic?
That's,
Like,
yeah, you're right. Yes, that's
because
right.
like I don't want to feel weak, so I
Mm.
make a decision to shut off my emotions, but you're
Mm.
still making an emotional decision, so you're doing the exact thing that you're trying not to do.
True.
And what happens, right, is now that I'm shut off and I'm not communicating,
Mm.
that hurts my job, that hurts my relationship, that hurts my connection with my God or spirit or whatever.
Mm.
It hurts my relationship with money and success because now I'm not in touch with like intuition. I'm not in touch with those gut feelings that, those ideas, like that's where emotions come from. Is so being in touch with that, it's creativity.
Yeah.
It's not just like, I don't want to feel these emotions. It's no, it also increases your amount of joy
Mm.
and even peace
Mm.
instead of just being a robot. So shutting down and not feeling emotions is one, making an emotional decision, ironically,
Mm.
and then it's making your life or less enjoyable. And I actually look at this an interesting way because men typically tend to be more logical. And so I think about it in a logical way. Is feeling my emotions going to be more helpful or less helpful? What would you say?
It's gonna be more helpful. More helpful.
Boom.
Yeah.
So I just look at it like binary.
Mm.
So feeling my emotions is more helpful to me.
Yes.
And so I feel it. That's a logical decision.
Mm.
And so now I'm like, it's the smart thing to do.
Yeah.
It's not just to do it because that's the right thing. Like, yes, I consider myself a good person, so I'm going to do it because I know it's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But also for people who are doubt, it's also the smart thing to do.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. So you say, let's go off the fear, feel your emotion, be vulnerable. No matter if you're a guy or a lady, just, yes, express yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you're lying to yourself,
Yeah. Be aligned to yourself. Yeah.
If you're not feeling it, you there's some like it even makes you sick. I mean,
Mm.
that's part of the logic behind it too of there's evidence that you shutting down and keeping your emotions inside of you
Mm-hmm.
is making you sick. Like it's making you physically ill.
Yes, that's true.
So that's like I believe that's what cancer comes from. That's what like chronic stress, like gut issues,
Mm.
heart issues. In America, heart disease is like the number one killer. Like so all these things are all stress based because we keep emotions inside. We
Mm.
eat terrible food. We make all fear based decisions. I mean, so many other reasons too. But yeah, if you're just able to express your emotions and how you feel, and I'm not saying like I'm perfect at this. Like I do this with my partner. Like I've just started to really like just say how I feel, and
Mm.
that's it.
Mm.
Because part of my identity is I want to look like I have it all figured out.
Ah, I get.
So if I express like I'm frustrated,
Mm-hmm.
then that reveals that I do not have it figured out.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if I continue to feel that and I store that, I'm never going to have it quote unquote figured out because I'm going to get frustrated over and over again.
Mm.
So if I want to let that emotion like go and not let it have control over me, then I need to feel it and then like cuz it passes. Like it's not a forever feeling.
Mm.
Like it it's like a river, right? Like it just keeps moving. Like if
Yes.
I put a leaf in the river,
Mm-hmm.
it just keeps passing by.
Mm.
But if I put a dam, that leaf is just going to keep spinning in the
Yes.
water right there.
Yes.
That's the same thing with your emotions.
Mm.
It's like it's literally energy in motion is an emotion. So you have to let it just pass and go through you. But if you resist it and try and block it, it stays longer and it stays stuck.
So you are telling us not to bottle up our emotions, let it flow like energy. Yeah.
Yeah, flow, baby.
That's great. So you are a fear alchemist, intuitive guide, a lot of things actually. That's good and
Yeah.
wonderful things. So what's the best way to get across to you, to get in contact with you, to work with you? I know you have some courses, you have some freebies, you have some
Yeah.
manuscript that one could download on your website. I'll place all this link in the show notes for this episode. So copy or click on the link to get across to you. But can you tell us about your courses and about what people
Mhm.
can get from you to in order to become you know free from their fear of whatever they have, or in order to live their purpose, in order to become a better version, not to become themselves, not a better version of themselves, but to become themselves.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah. So thank you, brother. Yeah, and so there's tons of freebies, right? So like the podcast Feeling Free
Mm,
has so much stuff on there.
yeah.
Like really, it's I feel like it's a freaking university on there.
Mm,
But and then yeah, there's meditation, there's a guide, so there's free stuff on the website you can get. And then yeah, if you want to work with me, but actually I like when you said that it actually sounded like walk with me, which I even like better, like because that's how I view it. I view that I'm walking with you.
yes.
I don't believe that you need to be fixed. That's the biggest thing when people come to work with me is like I don't believe that I'm fixing you. I believe that we are just activating and remember what is already inside of you.
Mm,
Because fear and trauma and victimhood and all these lies, the programming, conditioning, that is not who you are. So, right, going back to like what we said about being the best version of ourselves, yes, but also it's just more remembering and unlearning to become who we already are. So that's the ironic thing about it is, so that's what I believe. Like, so you can work with me in a mentorship setting if you feel called to. Like I do breakthrough sessions. If you're in the U.S., I do retreats. My next retreat is in October.
mm,
Or if the world is open, you could travel. Um, like when we did one right before the pandemic happened, it was in San Diego, California,
mm.
and someone flew out from Sweden, which was super cool.
Yeah.
That was like a big honor to me. And the crazy thing is, she decided 5 days before. It was crazy.
Yeah.
She decided 5 days before that she was going to fly out and come. I'm like, all right, well, let's freaking do it. And so, yeah, like, yeah, just like whenever you're ready. I mean, um, you know, and I offer and invite you to trust that feeling and lean into that fear, because usually when you feel really excited and you feel terrified, that's a good knowing like, okay, this is for me, whether it's working with me or anything else, right? Following the intuition of I'm excited because like I feel light and I feel energized because of like I feel who I am and what I can be without fear, but also I'm terrified because fear is trying to protect you, right, in the known and in the familiar.
Mm.
So it's totally normal to be excited and terrified.
Terrified. Wow, that's awesome. So, is there like a closing remark you would love to give me or the listeners out there? I've learned a lot from you already in regards to
Mm.
fear, vulnerability, and everything. But is there still something deep down in that well of wisdom of yours, like give us?
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you. There was something when I was speaking, like I think 5 minutes ago. I forgot what it was, but the biggest thing that like yeah I feel called to share is it's similar to what I just said of like you don't need to be fixed. Like really, like nothing is wrong with you. A couple weeks ago, I had a retreat and someone had a belief of because she had been clinically depressed for 5 years,
Mm,
on antidepressants, going through therapy, all the things. And that had become her identity so much that we figured out in the retreat that she had a belief that if I'm no longer suffering, then people will no longer love me.
mm,
Because, right,
yeah.
suffering and depression has now become her normal.
Mm,
And her family and society is treating her differently and showing her love because she's depressed. And so this is why we get stuck in depression, in victimhood, in whatever you want to call it, and just unhelpful thoughts and behaviors
Mm,
is because we subconsciously are being motivated to stay in that behavior.
mm,
And so she figured out in just 3 days compared to 5 days of therapy or 5 years of therapy and then 3 days in the retreat is that, okay, like I have not, like, yes, I've been wanting to not be depressed anymore, but subconsciously I had this belief and this fear that if I wasn't depressed anymore, then I wasn't going to be loved.
mm,
And so bringing that in of, yes, you have so many different layers that you probably don't know about, but tying that into there's nothing wrong with you for that either. Like you are incentivized how your brain works, how society works.
mm,
It's nothing is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with society. Nothing is wrong with whoever because everyone is doing the best that they can.
mm.
But now that you have this new information, you can make a new choice. You can build a new life. You can remember who you are. And so that's what I would offer is just remember who you are and nothing's wrong with you.
That's a very wonderful closing remark. Just remember who you are, and there is nothing wrong with you. Wow. Thank you so much,
Hmm.
Ben. I really appreciate everything I've been able to learn from you today. I'm really
Delby,
glad. Yeah.
I appreciate you, brother. Like for real, thank you for asking such great questions and being light and being a mirror for both of us.
Thank you so much. You're also a wonderful source of light. Also, I can see
Thank
that.
you.
I can feel it.